Kaspar Hauser appeared in Nuremberg on May 26, 1828, a mystery embodied in flesh. He was found wandering the streets, dressed in ragged clothes, barely able to speak. His speech consisted of just a few phrases, the most frequent being, "I want to be a cavalryman like my father," and a repeated mention of horse. A local shoemaker discovered him and handed him over to the authorities, puzzled by his strange behavior. Kaspar carried with him 2 letters, both addressed to the captain of the 4th Squadron of the 6th Cavalry Regiment in Nuremberg. The first letter, supposedly written by a farmer, claimed that Kaspar had been left in the farmer's care as a baby. The letter stated that the boy had never been allowed to leave the house and had been taught almost nothing. It requested that the captain either take him in or hang him. The second letter was supposedly from the boy's mother, dated 1812, stating that his father was a cavalryman and that Kaspar was born on April 30th, 1812. Authorities were immediately intrigued by the strange boy. He seemed to know nothing of the world outside of basic facts. His hands were soft and unmarked by labor, his skin pale and unused to sunlight. Most peculiarly, he could barely walk, and his legs appeared weak and unsteady. He moved awkwardly, like someone who had not used his body much. His mental and physical state suggested that he had been kept in isolation for much of his life. The people of Nuremberg quickly grew fascinated by this unusual figure. Many were struck by his childlike innocence and apparent ignorance of even the most basic concepts of life. He was placed under the care of Friedrich Daumer, a local schoolteacher and philosopher, who took an immediate interest in Kaspar's case. Daumer quickly realized that while Kaspar knew little, his mind was sharp and capable of learning at an astonishing rate. In Daumer's care, Kaspar began to learn how to speak properly and acquired knowledge of reading and writing. It was during this time that he started to recount fragments of his past. He claimed that he had spent his entire life in a small, dark room, never seeing another human being except for a mysterious man who would come to feed him. The man, Kaspar said, always wore a mask to conceal his identity and never spoke more than a few words. This figure would clean Kaspar's room, bring him bread and water, and occasionally leave him small toys. Kaspar described the room in vivid detail. It was just large enough for a bed and a few basic items, with no windows and no view of the outside world. He claimed to have been kept there for as long as he could remember, completely isolated. According to Kaspar, he had only learned to walk shortly before being released, having previously spent his entire life sitting or lying down. His captor had taught him the phrases he was found repeating, preparing him for his eventual release into the world. As Kaspar's story spread, so too did the intrigue surrounding him. Who was this boy? How had he come to be in such a strange, isolated existence? Rumors began to circulate that Kaspar might be of royal blood, possibly the heir to a throne. Some speculated that he had been hidden away to prevent him from claiming his rightful inheritance. Others believed he was the victim of a political conspiracy, hidden away by powerful forces who feared his return. One of the most persistent theories was that Kaspar was the rightful heir to the Grand Duchy of Baden. According to this theory, the real heir to the throne had been switched at birth and hidden away, with Kaspar as the true prince. The boy who had taken his place, it was suggested, had died as an infant, and Kaspar had been hidden in secrecy to prevent any claims to his lineage. Supporters of this theory pointed to the similarities between Kaspar's supposed birth date and the timeline of the royal family of Baden. As Kaspar's fame grew, so too did the number of people eager to meet him. Intellectuals, philosophers, and even royalty traveled to Nuremberg to meet the mystery boy and learn about his experiences. Some viewed him as a blank slate, a living example of what a human would be like if deprived of all social and environmental influences. Others believed him to be a key figure in a royal or political intrigue, someone whose very existence posed a threat to powerful interests. Despite the public fascination with Kaspar, his life in Nuremberg was far from peaceful. He was a deeply troubled young man, struggling to adjust to life outside the dark room in which he had been confined. His physical and mental health were fragile, and he was often overwhelmed by the simplest tasks or sensations. His emotional state was volatile, shifting from periods of calm to bouts of confusion and paranoia. In October 1829, just over a year after his arrival, a dramatic event deepened the mystery surrounding Kaspar Hauser. He was found in Dahmer's house, bleeding from a wound to his forehead. Kaspar claimed that he had been attacked by a masked man, the same figure who had imprisoned him as a child. According to Kaspar, the man had told him, "You must die before you leave the city," before striking him with a knife. The authorities launched an investigation, but no suspect was ever found. Some believed Kaspar's story of an attempted murder, seeing it as further evidence that powerful forces wanted him silenced. Others, however, were skeptical. Some began to suggest that Kaspar had inflicted the wound on himself in a bid for attention or as part of an elaborate scheme. His behavior had grown increasingly erratic in the months leading up to the attack, and many began to wonder whether his claims could be trusted. As time passed, Kaspar's life became increasingly difficult. His mental state continued to deteriorate, and he grew more paranoid. He frequently spoke of being watched and followed, convinced that someone was out to get him. His once innocent demeanor gave way to darker moods, and those who had once supported him began to distance themselves. Kaspar was eventually moved to Ansbach, where he lived under the care of a local official named Johann Georg Meyer. By this point, his reputation had soured, and many in the city viewed him with suspicion rather than fascination. The wild theories about his royal lineage persisted, but they were overshadowed by growing doubts about his credibility. In December 1833, 5 years after his mysterious arrival in Nuremberg, Kaspar Hauser's life ended in tragedy. On December 14th, he was found in the Ansbach court garden, gravely injured by a stab wound to the chest. Kaspar claimed that a stranger had lured him there with a promise to reveal the truth about his origins. When he arrived, the stranger attacked him with a dagger, stabbing him before fleeing. Despite his severe wound, Kaspar managed to make his way home, collapsing at the door and barely able to speak. He was treated by doctors, but the injury proved fatal. After 3 days of suffering, Kaspar Hauser died on December 17, 1833. His last words were cryptic and filled with desperation. "I didn't do it myself." Kaspar's death only deepened the mystery surrounding his life. Some people believed that he had been murdered to keep his true identity hidden. The theory that he was the rightful heir to the Grand Duchy of Baden gained new momentum, with supporters claiming that his death was orchestrated to prevent him from making a claim to the throne. They pointed to the earlier attack in 1829, when Kaspar had been wounded in the forehead by a masked assailant, as part of a long conspiracy to silence him. However, doubts lingered. Some suggested that Kaspar had inflicted the wound upon himself, either as a result of growing mental instability or as part of a plan to gain attention. His mental health had deteriorated over the years, and his increasing paranoia was well known. The note that Kaspar claimed the stranger had given him was also suspicious. Some believed that Kaspar had written the note himself, casting doubt on his account of the events leading to his death. The investigation into Kaspar's death yielded no definitive answers. The dagger used in the attack provided no clear evidence, and no one had witnessed the stabbing or seen a mysterious stranger leaving the garden. Despite various efforts to uncover the truth, Kaspar's death remained as much of an enigma as his life. In the years following his death, Kaspar Hauser became a symbol of unsolved mysteries. Theories about his true identity continued to circulate, and many remained convinced that he was a lost prince, hidden away to prevent him from claiming his birthright. Others saw him as a tragic figure, a young man who had been thrust into the world with no understanding of the forces that shaped his life. One of the figures who took a special interest in Kaspar's case was Lord Stanhope, a British nobleman. Stanhope had become deeply involved in Kaspar's life before his death, adopting him as a kind of ward and trying to uncover his true origins. After Kaspar's death, Lord Stanhope continued to investigate, traveling across Europe, meeting with royal courts, and interviewing witnesses in search of answers. However, despite his efforts, Stanhope was never able to confirm any of the theories about Kaspar's royal lineage. Over the years, Kaspar Hauser's story became the subject of books, plays, and films, each offering different interpretations of his life. Some portray him as a victim of political conspiracy, a prince hidden away and ultimately murdered to protect the interests of powerful figures. Others suggest that he was a troubled individual whose mysterious background may never have been what it seemed. Despite the numerous theories, the central question, who was Kaspar Hauser, remains unanswered. Was he truly a lost prince, or was he an ordinary boy caught up in extraordinary circumstances? Was his death the result of a calculated murder, or a tragic end brought on by his own actions? The mystery of Kaspar Hauser continues to fascinate, just as it did when he first appeared on the streets of Nuremberg nearly 2 centuries ago. His life and death, filled with unanswered questions and surrounded by intrigue, have left an enduring mark on history, a mystery that has captivated the imagination for generations.